a strange feeling when you realize that you weren't a person to someone, you were just a place. My friend threw a party because she knew I wouldn't be there. I was the only obstacle preventing her from living in my house as if it were her own. And this is a different kind of betrayal. It's not a mistake. That's the plan. My name is Melissa. I'm 38, and for most of my life, people have been telling me that I'm responsible, calm, someone you can rely on. I work long shifts. I'm a nurse. It's exhausting work, and when I finish, I'm fed up. I just want silence. I want to have my own personal space. I've never been good at conflict. I'll do almost anything to avoid a fight. I'm willing to pay for it. I'll tell myself that it doesn't matter. I'll find a way to justify it just to find peace. My sister always told me that this is not the world. It's just silence. I didn't understand what she meant until it happened. Then Dana, my friend. Before that night, I would have said that he was my best friend. Dana is, well, she's the exact opposite of me. She's 35, but she's full of energy, like a much younger person. She's what people call the soul of the party, outgoing, spontaneous, fun. These are the words that people call her, the same words as me. But there are other words, impulsive, self-serving. She does what she wants and when she wants, and she's very, very good at convincing you that it's difficult with you if you have a problem with it. She'll laugh it off. She will advise you to relax. She'll make you feel like you're ruining all the fun. And because I hate conflict, I always let her do it. I'm always just relaxed. We've been friends for over a decade. We met through a mutual friend and just somehow we got along. Or rather, she became attached to him. She needed someone reliable, and I was like that. She said I was her rock, but a rock is just something you stand on. He can't move. It just has to be there. The pattern started small. It's so small that I didn't even consider it a pattern. It was just, Dana is Dana. She was borrowing things, a jacket, the book, and they just disappeared into her world. I asked about them a month later, but she didn't remember anything about it. Or she'd say, "Oh yeah, I think I lent it to someone. It was my jacket." But now she was a part of her inventory that needed to be managed. I stopped lending her things that were dear to me. It was my decision. I adjusted instead of arguing with her. It was easier that way. Then it became about my time. She'd tell me we were going to a quiet dinner, just the two of us. I'd get ready for a calm evening, something my tired brain could handle. Then I'd get in her car, and she'd say, "Hey, I told a few other people to meet us there. Hope you don't mind." And of course, I minded. I desperately minded. But what was I going to do? Tell her to turn the car around? Tell her to uninvite people? That would be a scene. That would be conflict. So I'd just smile and say it was fine. And I'd spend the whole night feeling drained and overwhelmed, surrounded by her friends who I barely knew. I always paid the price for her spontaneity. The real issue, the one that led to all of this, was my house. I bought my own place about 5 years ago. It's nothing fancy. It's a small 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. It's my sanctuary. It's the only place on earth where I can just shut the door and not have to be on. No demands, no emergencies, just me. Dana loved my house. She called it her escape, too. She was over a lot. At first, it was nice. We'd watch movies, we'd talk. It felt like a real friendship. But then she started treating it less like my home and more like a clubhouse. She'd show up unannounced. I'd be exhausted after a 12-hour shift, just wanting to be alone, and my doorbell would ring. It was always her. "I was in the neighborhood," she'd say, already walking past me into the living room. And I'd let her, because saying, "I really need to be alone right now, Dana," felt so harsh. It felt like a rejection. So I'd make tea. I'd listen to her talk about her day. I'd put my own need for quiet on a shelf. Again, my sister Sarah saw it. She lives a few states away, but we talk on the phone all the time. She never liked Dana. She told me, more than once, that Dana didn't see me as a friend. She saw me as a utility, a free place to hang out, a therapist who didn't charge, a doormat. I always defended Dana. I'd say, "You don't know her like I do. She has a good heart. She's just a little thoughtless sometimes." Thoughtless. That was the word I used to excuse everything. The spare key was the real beginning of the end. I just didn't know it. About a year ago, Dana was going through some drama with a guy she was dating. It was messy. She called me late one night, crying, saying she didn't want to go back to her apartment. So I told her to come over. Of course I did. She stayed for 2 days. When she was leaving, she was worried about something happening again. She asked if she could have a spare key. Just for emergencies, she said. You know, in case I ever get locked out of my place late at night and can't get a locksmith, or if something like this happens again, I'll feel so much safer knowing I have a place to go. It felt logical. It felt like something a good friend would do. I had a spare key I kept hidden outside. I went and got it for her. I put it in her hand. I felt a little flicker of something, a hesitation, a tiny voice in the back of my head that said, "Don't," but I ignored it. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was being a bad friend. This was Dana, my best friend. She wouldn't misuse my trust. So I gave her the key for emergencies. That was my biggest mistake. After that, the lines got even blurrier. She would let herself in, not often at first, and she'd always have a reason. I'd come home from work and find a container of milk in my fridge. I'd get a text from her later. "Hey, I was passing by and realized I forgot to get milk, so I used your key to grab some from your fridge. I replaced it. Hope that's okay." What do you say to that? No, it's not okay. It seemed so petty. She replaced the milk. No harm done. But it wasn't about the milk. It was about the fact that she had entered my private space, my home, without me there. For her own convenience, it felt wrong. It felt like a violation. But it was such a small one that complaining about it seemed insane. So I said nothing. I just texted back, "No problem. Thanks for replacing it." And by saying nothing, I was saying something. I was saying, this is acceptable. My sister noticed it during one of her visits. She came to stay with me for a weekend. Dana was over, of course. She just walked in the front door without knocking. She saw my sister's suitcase and said, "Oh, you have company?" As if she was the one who was being intruded upon. Later that night, after Dana left, Sarah looked at me. She asked if Dana always did that, just walk in. I admitted that she did sometimes. Sarah was quiet for a minute. Then she told me something that stuck with me. She said, "Melissa, your house has a door. The door has a lock. Those things exist for a reason. They aren't just suggestions." She told me Dana didn't respect my boundaries because I never showed her where they were. I knew she was right, but the thought of having that conversation with Dana, of asking for my key back, it filled me with this awful, paralyzing anxiety. She would be so hurt. She would act so betrayed. She would make me feel like I was a monster for not trusting her. And I just didn't have the energy for that fight. My job is hard. I deal with people in pain all day. When I come home, I just want it to be easy. And avoiding conflict with Dana was the easy route, so I kept taking it. The week of the party was a particularly tough one at work. We were short-staffed. I was pulling a double shift on a Friday, 16 hours. I knew I was going to be completely wiped out. I talked to Dana on the phone on Thursday night. I was telling her about my schedule. I remember exactly what I said. I'm working from 6 in the morning until 10 at night. I'm probably just going to come home and pass out immediately. I was just venting, just telling my friend about my life. But she wasn't just listening. She was gathering information. She said all the right things. "Oh, that's awful. You're going to be so tired. Make sure you get some rest." It sounded like concern. It sounded like friendship. I had no idea that what she heard was, "Melissa's house will be empty for 16 hours. She knew I'd be exhausted. She knew I wouldn't be home. She knew I wouldn't be checking my phone. She had the key. She had the location. And she had the opportunity. That Friday was just as brutal as I expected. Everything that could go wrong at the hospital did. I was running around for 16 straight hours. By the time 9 p.m. rolled around, I was barely functioning. I was just a zombie going through the motions. Then a miracle happened. A few nurses from the night shift who were on call agreed to come in early. The floor manager saw the state I was in. She knew I'd been there since dawn. She came up to me and told me I could go home. It was 9:30. I was getting out half an hour early. It felt like winning the lottery. All I could think about was my bed, my quiet, empty house. I didn't even think to call or text anyone. Why would I? I was just going home. I remember the drive. I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. I was already thinking about what I would do. Kick off my shoes, maybe have a glass of water, and then just collapse into bed. The thought of my silent, peaceful house was the only thing keeping me going. I turned onto my street, and that's when I knew something was wrong. My street is usually quiet at night, maybe a car or two parked here and there, but tonight it was full. There were cars lining both sides of the road, cars I had never seen before, and a lot of them were parked right in front of my house. My first thought was that my neighbor was having a party. My immediate neighbor is a young couple, and they have people over sometimes. I felt a little spike of annoyance. I was so tired, and the thought of noise next door was not appealing. But then I pulled into my driveway, and I saw it. There was a car parked in my driveway, a car that wasn't mine. My heart just stopped. For a second, my brain couldn't process it. It just didn't compute. Why would a stranger's car be in my driveway? Then I heard it, the noise. It was faint from the car, but it was there, a low thumping sound, music and voices. And it wasn't coming from my neighbor's house. It was coming from my house. I sat in my car for a full minute, just staring at my own front door. The light was on. I could see shadows moving through the windows of my living room. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Was I robbed? Did someone break in? But why would robbers be having a party? Was there a mistake? Did I come home on the wrong day? Am I so tired that I'm hallucinating? I checked the date on my phone. It was Friday. It was my house, and there were people inside it. I got out of the car. My legs felt shaky. I was wearing my scrubs. I probably looked like a mess. I felt this surge of adrenaline, this fight-or-flight feeling. I walked up my own front path. The closer I got, the louder the music was, the more voices I could hear. Laughter. It was a party. There was a full-blown party happening inside my house. I didn't have my keys in my hand. I didn't need them. The front door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and I walked in. The scene in front of me, it's burned into my memory. My small living room was packed with people, strangers, at least 30 or 40 of them. They were standing everywhere, holding cups, talking, laughing. The music was loud. The air was thick. It was my house, but it felt completely alien. It was like I had walked into someone else's life. No one noticed me at first. I was just another person coming through the door. I stood there, right in the entryway, and my brain just shut down. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was just staring. I saw a guy I didn't know putting his cup down on a little table I owned, leaving a wet ring. I saw a woman with her shoes off, walking on my floor. These were my things. This was my space. And it was filled with strangers who were treating it like a public venue. Then I saw her, Dana. She was standing in the middle of the room, right near the kitchen. She was holding a bottle of something, pouring a drink for someone. She was glowing. She was in her element. She was the center of attention. She was acting like the queen of the castle. My castle. She was telling a story, laughing loudly. Everyone around her was hanging on her every word. She looked so happy, so completely at home. And then her eyes scanned the room, and she saw me. I was just standing by the door, still in my work uniform, probably with a look of absolute shock on my face. Our eyes met, and the change in her expression, it was instant. The big, happy, performative smile just vanished. It didn't fade. It was like a switch was flipped. Her face went blank. The color drained from it. It wasn't a look of surprise. It wasn't, "Oh, Melissa, you're home early." It was the look of someone who has been caught, red-handed. There was no confusion in her eyes. There was only guilt, and maybe a little bit of fear. She knew. She knew exactly what she was doing. In that 1 second, in that one look, everything became clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a case of crossed wires. This was deliberate. She knew I was supposed to be at work. She had counted on it. My early arrival was the one thing she hadn't planned for. We just stared at each other from across the room. It probably only lasted a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. The music was still playing. People were still talking. But for me, the entire world had gone silent. It was just me and her and this horrible, suffocating truth that was now hanging in the air between us. She put the bottle down slowly. She started walking towards me. Her whole demeanor had changed. The confident, bubbly host was gone. Now she looked small. As she got closer, the people between us started to part. A few of them noticed the weird energy. They looked from her face to mine. They could tell something was wrong. The noise in the room started to die down. People were starting to watch us. She stopped about 5 feet away from me. She tried to smile. It was a weak, pathetic thing. She started to speak, but I didn't even hear the words. It was just noise, excuses. I could see it in her face, the frantic search for a lie that would fix this. But I wasn't listening. I was just looking at her, and all I could think was, "You did this on purpose. You used my trust. You used my home. You used me." I didn't say anything. I just kept looking at her. I think my silence was more powerful than any shouting could have been. Her voice trailed off. The silence in the room was deafening now. Everyone was watching. They knew. Even if they didn't know the details, they knew. This was not her house, and the real owner had just walked in. The atmosphere shifted completely. The fun party vibe evaporated. It was replaced by a thick, awkward shame. People started to avoid eye contact. They started shuffling their feet. I saw one guy quietly pick up his jacket, then another. No one said anything. They just started to move towards the door. They had to walk past me to get out. A few of them mumbled, "Sorry," as they passed. They looked embarrassed. They looked like they had been caught up in something they didn't understand. Dana just stood there, watching her party dissolve, watching her social currency burn to the ground. Her face was a mess of emotions, humiliation, anger, panic. She tried to talk to me again. She reached out her hand as if to touch my arm. I took a step back. It was a small movement, but it was definitive. It was a boundary. the first one I had ever set with her, and it felt like a wall of steel. Her hand dropped. The exodus continued. People were practically fleeing now. They didn't want to be there. They didn't want to be witnesses to whatever this was. One girl, someone I'd never seen before, paused as she was leaving. She looked at me, and her face was full of genuine confusion. She told me she was sorry. She said she thought Dana lived here. Another guy who was with her nodded. He said Dana had told them she was co-renting the place with a roommate who was always working. He said they had no idea. And that's when the second wave of realization hit me. It was worse than I thought. She hadn't just thrown a party at my house. She had been telling people it was her house, or at least partially hers. She wasn't just borrowing my space for a night. She was actively rewriting the reality of it. She was laying a claim to it. The lie was deeper, more calculated. She wasn't just being impulsive. She was being deceptive. That's what broke me. The idea that she was walking around telling people that my home, my sanctuary, was hers to use, that I was just a footnote in my own life, the roommate who was always working. I just stared at Dana. The hurt must have been all over my face. She saw my expression change. She knew I had heard them. The last of the guests trickled out. The front door finally closed, and then it was just the two of us, standing in the wreckage of my living room and the wreckage of our friendship. The music was off. The silence was heavy. There were empty cups everywhere, a spill on the floor. The whole place felt trashed, violated. Dana started talking, fast. The words just tumbled out of her mouth. It was a waterfall of excuses. She was sorry. She didn't mean for it to get so big. It was just supposed to be a few friends. She said her own apartment was too small. She said she knew I was tired and she was going to clean everything up before I got home. She swore I never would have known. That was the part she kept repeating. You never would have known. As if the problem was me finding out, not the act itself. She was apologizing for getting caught, not for what she did. She told me I was overreacting, that it was just a party, that I should be happy my house was being used for some fun for once, since I never use it for anything. You never use the house anyway, she said. That sentence hit me like a physical blow. My house, the one I worked 16-hour shifts to pay for, the one place I came to for refuge from the world. She saw it as an empty, wasted resource, and she saw me as the person who was wasting it. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I was too empty for that. All the anger had just drained out of me, and it was replaced by this profound, hollow sadness. I just looked at her, and I said one thing: give me my key. My voice was quiet, flat, but it was firm. She stopped talking. She stared at me. She tried to argue. She said she needed it for emergencies. She said this was a one-time thing, a mistake. She swore it would never happen again. I just repeated myself. Give me the key, Dana. I held out my hand. She looked at my hand, then back at my face. She was searching for the old Melissa, the one who would back down, the one who would let it go just to have peace. But that person wasn't there anymore. She had been erased by a house full of strangers. Slowly, reluctantly, she reached into her purse. She fumbled around for a moment. Then she pulled out my key. It looked so small in her hand, just a little piece of metal, but it represented so much more: trust, access, power. She didn't put it in my hand. She just held it out, a final silent plea. I took it from her. The metal felt cold. I closed my hand around it. You need to leave now, I said. Tears started to well up in her eyes, the real manipulative tears I had seen her use so many times before to get her way. She started to cry. She said I was throwing away 10 years of friendship. She said she had made a mistake, and I was being cruel. I didn't respond. I just walked to the front door and opened it. I stood there, holding the door open, waiting. She looked at me, her face streaked with tears. She was waiting for me to break, to apologize for her behavior, to comfort her. It was a role I had played 100 times, but not this time. I just waited. Finally, she seemed to realize it wasn't going to work. The game was over. She walked past me, out the door, without another word. I watched her walk to her car. Then I closed the door. I locked it. I slid the deadbolt across. A sound I had never felt so deeply before. I leaned my forehead against the door, and for the first time that night, I let myself breathe. I was alone, in my trashed, violated house, but I was finally, truly, alone. The next few hours are a blur. I didn't clean up. I couldn't. I just walked through the rooms. I saw the mess through a fog of exhaustion and shock. There was a stain on my couch, a chip in a glass, little signs of disrespect everywhere. Each one was a small testament to how little I mattered in her plan. I felt like a ghost in my own home. I eventually went to my bedroom. It was the one room they hadn't seemed to enter. The door was closed. I went inside and just sat on the edge of my bed. I was still in my scrubs. I hadn't even changed. I just sat there for a long, long time. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. It was a deeper kind of hurt, a hollowed-out feeling. The friendship wasn't just broken. It felt like it had never been real in the first place. It was a performance, and the show was finally over. The next day, I called a locksmith. I had him come and change all the locks on my doors. It cost money I didn't really have to spare, but it was the most necessary expense I had ever paid. Watching him replace the old locks with new ones, it was symbolic. I was taking back control. I was securing my space. I was making my home mine again. When he handed me the new set of keys, they felt the locksmith left. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into its new home was a solid, definitive thud. It was a sound of finality. I stood in the entryway, the two new keys clutched in my palm. They felt heavier than they should, like small anchors. The house was silent. It was a thick, syrupy silence, completely different from the peaceful quiet I was used to. This silence felt loud. It was an absence, the absence of music, of laughter, of strangers, the absence of a friend. It's a strange feeling to be a ghost in your own home. I walked through the living room, or what was left of it. Every surface was sticky. A film of spilled beer and nameless sugary drinks coated the floorboards, my coffee table, the arms of my sofa. Red plastic cups were everywhere, some crushed, some still holding a 1/4 inch of murky liquid. A single shoe, a black stiletto that was definitely not mine, lay on its side near the fireplace like a fallen soldier. The air smelled sour, a mix of stale alcohol, sweat, and something vaguely like burnt sugar. This wasn't my home. It was the wreckage. It was the aftermath of a party I never went to, a party I was now tasked with cleaning up. For 10 years, I had made excuses for Dana. It was easier. It was easier to let her borrow the dress I loved, knowing I might not see it again. It was easier to let her change our dinner plans at the last minute for a more exciting offer, because arguing would just make me the bad guy. The difficult one. She was very, very good at that. She could make you feel unreasonable for wanting your own things, for wanting your own time, for wanting your own house to yourself. I walked into the kitchen. The sink was a mountain of cups and plates. A pizza box gaped open on the counter, a few sad crusts left inside. Someone had spilled red wine on my white quartz countertops, a deep purple stain that looked like a wound. I touched the edge of it. It was dry. It had been there for hours. Dana knew how much I loved these countertops. I had saved for a year for them. She had been with me when I picked out the slab. She had told me they were perfect. You never would have known. My sister's voice echoed in my head. If you hadn't come home early, you never would have known. She would have cleaned it all up, and you'd be none the wiser. But that was the part that made it worse. The betrayal wasn't the party. It wasn't the mess. It was the intention. It was the calculated plan to use my sanctuary while I was away, trusting in my absence. My home wasn't a place she respected. It was a resource she could exploit. I wasn't a person. I was a convenience, a place to crash, a place to party, a roommate who was always working. The word still felt like a punch to the gut. It was such a simple, dismissive lie. It erased me. It demoted me in my own life, in my own home, to a background character. It made me small, and it made her the star, the generous host, sharing her cool, spacious place with all her friends. My phone buzzed on the counter where I'd left it. I looked at the screen. Dana. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. I stared at the message. I didn't know what to say either. There was nothing to say. I didn't pick up the phone. I just watched the screen go dark. A minute later, it buzzed again. Dana. Mel, please just tell me you're okay. I'm worried about you. A hot, hollow feeling spread through my chest. The manipulation was so familiar, so instantaneous. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about the consequences for her. She was testing the waters, trying to see if her apology had worked, if my anger had softened. By framing it as concern for my well-being, she was trying to make me responsible for her peace of mind. If I didn't answer, I was the one being cruel. If I didn't reassure her, I was the one prolonging the conflict. It had always worked before. I turned the phone over, screen down on the sticky counter. I wouldn't do it. Not this time. The silence was my answer. I moved upstairs, my feet sticking to each step. My bedroom door was ajar. I pushed it open. In here, it was mostly untouched, but the door to my ensuite bathroom was open, and I could see used towels crumpled on the floor. My towels. Someone had rifled through my medicine cabinet. Bottles of lotion and face wash were knocked over. An expensive bottle of perfume I only used on special occasions was sitting on the edge of the sink, the cap missing. It was a violation. That was the only word for it. A deep, personal violation. This was my space. The one place in the world I could be completely off. The one place I didn't have to be a nurse, a sister, a friend. I could just be. And she had let strangers in here. They had used my things, stood in my shower, looked at their faces in my mirror. I felt drained. The adrenaline from the night before was gone, replaced by a bone-deep weariness that my 16-hour shift hadn't caused. I sat on the edge of my bed, the mattress sighing under my weight. I was a stranger here now. The comfort was gone, replaced by a lingering sense of grime and intrusion. I didn't want to touch anything. I didn't want to sleep in my own bed. The phone buzzed again, a frantic, insistent vibration against the kitchen counter downstairs. Then it stopped. A moment later, it started ringing. The sound was jarring, an assault on the quiet. I pictured her face the way she would look right now. Not guilty, not ashamed, annoyed, frustrated that I wasn't answering, that I wasn't playing my part. My part was to forgive. My part was to understand that she was just spontaneous, that things just got out of hand. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I was her rock. She told me that all the time. But a rock is just something you stand on. It's something you use for support until you're ready to jump to the next thing. You don't ask the rock how it's feeling. You just trust it will be there, solid and unmoving, I had been solid and unmoving for a decade. The phone started ringing again. I flinched. I was about to go down and turn it off when I saw the caller ID on my watch. "Sarah," I answered, my voice raspy. "Hey." "Oh, thank God," she said, her voice a wave of relief. "I've been calling. I was about to get in my car. Are you okay? What happened after I left?" "I'm here," I said. It was all I could manage. "Did you do it? Did you change the locks?" she asked, her tone direct. No small talk. That was Sarah. "Yeah, the locksmith just left." "Good," she said, the word sharp and final. "Good. How are you? Don't say you're fine." Tears I didn't know were there pricked my eyes. "I'm tired," I admitted. "The house it's a wreck, Sarah." "I know. I saw. Has she tried to contact you?" "She texted and called." "What did she say?" "That she's sorry, that she's worried about me." Sarah let out a short, humorless laugh. "Of course she is. Worried you might finally be done with her. Don't answer, Mel. Please tell me you haven't answered." "I haven't." "Keep it that way. It's a trap. It's a test to see if the old rules still apply," she said. Her words were like steel, reinforcing something in me that was still fragile. "This isn't about a party, Melissa. You know that, right? This is about respect. And she has none for you. She never has." I was quiet, letting her words sink in. She was right. I knew she was right. I had always known it on some level. I just hadn't wanted to see it. It was easier to look away. "It feels so..." I trailed off, searching for the word. "Hollowed out," she supplied. "Yes." "I know," she said, her voice softening. "But it's better than being a doormat. A hollowed out house can be filled again. A doormat just gets stepped on forever." We talked for a few more minutes. She didn't offer to come over and help clean. She knew I needed to do this myself. This was my space to reclaim. Her call wasn't about solving the problem. It was about validating the solution. She was telling me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I was right. After we hung up, I went back downstairs. I looked at the mess, the mountain of trash, the sticky floors, the stained counter. It was overwhelming, a monument to a friendship that had been a lie. For a long moment, I just stood there, in the center of the disaster. I could have called a cleaning service. I had the money. It would have been faster. It would have been easier. But I walked to the pantry and pulled out a box of heavy-duty trash bags. I went to the sink under the kitchen cabinet and took out a pair of yellow rubber gloves. I pulled them on, the snap of the rubber against my wrists echoing in the silent room. I picked up the first red cup. I tossed it into the black bag. It made a hollow plastic sound as it landed. Then I picked up another and another, one piece of trash at a time. This was my house, and I was taking it back. The locksmith's van pulled away from the curb, its tail lights shrinking into red pinpricks before disappearing around the corner. I stood on my porch, a new set of keys clutched in my hand. The metal was cold and sharp against my palm, the edges unfamiliar. It was done. The house was mine again. Only it wasn't. The silence was the loudest thing in the house, louder than the ghost of the bass that still vibrated in my bones. It was a heavy, suffocating thing, the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. It was the quiet of a crime scene, a violation. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, began to buzz. I didn't have to look. I knew who it was. It buzzed once, a single text, then again and again, a frantic, desperate rhythm. I pictured Dana on the other end, her thumbs flying across the screen, crafting the perfect sequence of apology, justification, and accusation. The performance had begun. I ignored it. Instead, I walked through the wreckage. I was an archaeologist excavating a ruin, trying to understand the civilization that had destroyed my own. There were sticky red rings on my wooden coffee table, the one my grandfather had made. A cigarette had been stubbed out in a potted succulent, the soil blackened, and the plant's fleshy leaves burned. Someone had spilled a drink down the wall in the hallway, leaving a dark, weeping stain on the pale gray paint. It felt personal. It was personal. This wasn't the thoughtless mess of a party. This was a complete and total disregard for me, for my life, for the sanctuary I had worked so hard to build. I wasn't a person to them. I was just an absence. My name is Melissa, but in this house, on that night, I had no name. I was just the roommate who was always working. I found a large, industrial-sized trash bag under the sink and began. My movements were slow, automatic. My body was drained, but my mind was horribly awake. I picked up empty beer bottles, plastic cups, and crumpled napkins smeared with lipstick. Every piece of trash felt like an insult. Every sticky ring on my coffee table was a scar. Dana had always been good at making her problems my responsibility. It was her gift. Her car broke down, and suddenly it was my job to figure out her transportation for the week. She overspent her budget, and it was my couch she crashed on while she got back on her feet. She did what she wants, when she wants, and she's very, very good at convincing you that you're the one being difficult if you have a problem with it. I had made it easy for her. I realize that now. I avoided the argument. I sidestepped the confrontation. I told myself it was easier to just let it go, to lend her the car, to let her stay for a few more days. It was easier, until it wasn't. My phone buzzed again, this time with an incoming call. Sarah, my sister. I let the trash bag slip from my fingers and leaned against the kitchen counter, the cool quartz a shock against my tired back. I answered. Mel? Her voice was tight with concern. I've been calling. What's going on? I opened my mouth, but only a choked sound came out. The wall of steel I had built around myself during the confrontation with Dana began to crumble. Melissa, talk to me. Are you okay? She threw a party, I whispered. The words felt foreign, absurd. At my house. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. She... What? When? Tonight. I came home early. The whole street was full of cars. The house was... Sarah, it was full of people. Oh, Mel. The sympathy in her voice was my undoing. A single, hot tear traced a path down my cheek. I wasn't crying from sadness. It was the sheer, hollowed-out exhaustion of it all. Did you kick her out? Please tell me you kicked her out. I did, I said, my voice a little stronger. I took my key back. Good. The word was sharp, definitive. And you're going to change the locks first thing in the morning. Already did, I said. The locksmith just left. A sigh of relief came through the phone. Okay. Good. I'm proud of you. I mean it. I didn't feel proud. I felt contaminated. She's been texting me. Of course she has, Sarah said, her tone laced with a familiar cynicism I was only now beginning to appreciate. Let me guess. I'm so sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. It just got out of hand. You know how things get. It was so close to the first few texts I'd glimpsed on my screen that a humorless laugh escaped me. Pretty much. Don't answer, she commanded. Not a word. You owe her nothing. Not an explanation, not a final fight, nothing. Silence is the only thing people like her can't manipulate. People like her. My sister had seen it for years. She had tried to tell me in her own direct way. She uses you, Mel. She doesn't respect you. I'd always defended Dana. She's just spontaneous. That's just how she is. I was her rock, but a rock is just something you stand on. It's a convenient place to rest until you're ready to move on. You were never her friend, Sarah said softly, as if reading my thoughts. You were a resource, a very convenient one. The truth of it settled into my bones, heavy and cold. You were just a place. We talked for a few more minutes, her voice a lifeline in the quiet, trashed house. She made me promise to call her in the morning. After we hung up, I felt a little less like I was floating away. Her validation was an anchor. It wasn't me. I wasn't the one being difficult. I went back to cleaning. I moved into the living room where the damage was worst. Tucked between two couch cushions, I found a man's leather wallet. It was expensive looking, worn soft with use. I opened it, looking for an ID. My intention was to find a name, maybe a phone number to get it back to its owner. Inside, behind a driver's license, was a folded piece of paper. It looked like a page torn from a small notebook. Curiosity, or maybe a morbid need to know, made me unfold it. The handwriting was a feminine, loopy scrawl. "Hey babe, had to run, but you left your wallet. Figured I'd hide it here for you. Don't want the psycho roommate to find it and steal your cash. Dana said she's a nightmare, always complaining about noise. Can't wait to do this again when she's gone for a whole weekend. Call me. Jess." I read it once, then twice. The words blurred. The psycho roommate. A nightmare. Always complaining about noise. It felt like the air had been punched from my lungs. This was more than just using my house. This was a character assassination. Dana hadn't just borrowed my home. She had actively painted me as the villain in it. She had built a narrative around my absence, turning my desire for peace into a personality flaw, my hard work into a punchline. The guests at the party hadn't just been strangers in my house. They had been invited in under the pretense that I was some unhinged shrew they had to tiptoe around. The violation was deeper than I could have imagined. She hadn't just stolen my space. She was trying to steal my name. She was rewriting my story, and I wasn't even there to defend myself. You never would have known. The thought was chilling. If I hadn't gotten off work early, I never would have known. I would have come home to a suspiciously clean house, maybe a lingering smell of smoke. Dana would have had an excuse for any stray cup I found. A small get-together, she would have said. It just got a little bigger than I planned. She would have apologized with that dazzling smile, and I, desperate to keep the peace, would have accepted it. I would have gone on believing she was my friend, all while she was telling strangers I was a psycho. I closed the wallet, the note still inside. I placed it on the clean part of the kitchen counter. I would deal with that tomorrow. For now, I walked back to the trash bag. My movements were no longer slow or automatic. They were deliberate. Each bottle I dropped into the bag was a decision. Each crumpled napkin was a final word. I was not excavating a ruin. I was clearing the site for new construction. I gathered the last of the garbage from the living room floor, my back aching, my head pounding. I tied the top of the black bag into a firm, tight knot. It was heavy, full of the evidence of my friend's betrayal. I dragged it out the front door and left it on the curb. It was a start. The name on the driver's license was Kevin Miller. The note was folded neatly beside it, written in a hurried, looping script. My psycho roommate. It was a new kind of quiet. The silence left by the fleeing party guests had been loud, ringing with the ghost of music and shame. The silence after I changed the locks was heavy, thick with finality. This silence, though, was different. It was sharp. It was a single, piercing note that cut through the exhaustion and the violation and hollowed out whatever was left. Psycho. The word didn't feel real. It was a label from a movie, a caricature. It wasn't me. I was the reliable one, the calm one, the nurse who held things together when they were falling apart. I was the one who remembered birthdays and watered plants and showed up. I was the rock, but a rock is just something you stand on. A rock doesn't have feelings. A rock can't be a psycho. I sank onto one of the kitchen stools, my fingers tracing the worn leather of the wallet. The party wasn't just an act of spontaneous selfishness. The trashed house, the spilled drinks, the sheer disrespect that was one layer of betrayal. But this note was another. This was premeditated. This was a story she had been telling, a narrative she had built where I was the villain in my own home. You never would have known. The thought came back, cold and clear. If I hadn't come home early, I would have walked into a perfectly clean house. Dana would have been a hero, the responsible friend who tidied up after a small, respectable get-together she'd forgotten to mention. And all the while, these strangers, these people sleeping in my bed and drinking from my mugs, would have been walking around my sanctuary thinking of me as the unhinged roommate, the crazy one you had to feel sorry for Dana for putting up with. It was convenient. Her whole life was built on convenience. My house was a convenient place to crash. My car was a convenient way to get around. My stability was a convenient backdrop for her chaos. And when my existence became an inconvenience, when my rules or my presence got in the way of a party she wanted to throw, I was conveniently rewritten as a psycho. It was easier than admitting she was using a friend. It was easier than respecting a boundary. My phone lying on the counter buzzed again and again, a rapid-fire series of texts from Dana. I didn't have to look. I knew what they would say. A torrent of apologies, excuses, and pleas. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Please, Mel, just talk to me. The buzzing stopped. For a moment, there was only the hum of the refrigerator, the quiet I had worked so hard to build. Then came the pounding, a frantic, desperate pounding on my new front door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a demand, an assault on the peace. Mel, Melissa, please, I know you're in there. Her voice was thick with manufactured tears. I could hear the performance in it. I walked out of the kitchen and stood in the hallway, just looking at the door. The new deadbolt felt like a wall of steel. Mel, I messed up. I messed up so bad, I know. Just let me explain. I crept closer, my bare feet silent on the wood floor, and looked through the peephole. There she was, a distorted fish-eye figure on my porch. Her hair was a mess, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. She looked wrecked. She looked broken. It was an image crafted for maximum sympathy, her stage. Please don't do this, she sobbed, her palm flat against the door. Don't shut me out. You're my best friend. My hand went to the deadbolt, a ghost of an old habit, the ingrained impulse to smooth things over, to make the conflict go away. My stomach twisted with the familiar anxiety, the desire to just open the door and absorb her apology and pretend it was enough. But I was holding the wallet. I could feel its weight in my other hand. I could feel the phantom paper of the note. My psycho roommate. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched her. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry she got caught. She was sorry she lost her key. She was sorry her access had been revoked. The performance on my porch wasn't about her remorse for violating my home. It was about her panic at losing it. You were just a place. After another minute of unanswered cries, her tone shifted. The desperation curdled into frustration. Seriously, Mel, you're just going to ignore me after everything? This is ridiculous. There it was, the pivot, the part where my reaction became the problem, the part where my refusal to accept the unacceptable was painted as an overreaction. She wasn't just good at it, she was a master. I backed away from the door, my resolve hardening from a liquid fear into something solid. I walked back to the kitchen, leaving her to shout at the unyielding wood and metal. I put the wallet on the counter and finally picked up my phone. I didn't look at Dana's messages. I scrolled to another name, Sarah. She answered on the second ring. "Hey you, are you alive? I've been worried." "I'm alive," I said. My voice sounded thin, stretched. "Did you get the locks changed?" "I did," I said. "She's outside my door right now." There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice, sharp and devoid of surprise. "She showed up? Of course she did. Don't you dare open it, Mel." "I'm not," I said. The words felt good, true. "I'm not opening it." "Good, let her scream. What does she want?" I took a breath. "She wants to explain." "Let me guess," Sarah said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "She's sorry. She was stressed. It was a mistake. It'll never happen again, and you're her best friend." The accuracy of it sent a cold shudder through me. "You forgot that I'm being ridiculous for not immediately forgiving her." "Ah, yes. Phase 2. The part where you're the bad guy for having feelings." Classic. Sarah sighed. "Just stay strong, Mel. You're doing the right thing. You know that, right?" "I found something," I said quietly, looking at the wallet on the counter. I told her about Kevin Miller. I told her about the note. The line was silent for a long moment. The shouting outside had finally stopped. When Sarah spoke again, all the sarcasm was gone. Her voice was pure, cold anger. "She called you a what?" "A psycho roommate," I repeated. The word tasted like ash. That. Sarah seemed to be searching for a word big enough. "That's not a friend, Mel. That's an enemy. That's someone who actively resents you for the space you provide her. Oh, I could just kill her." "It makes sense, though," I said, a strange, detached clarity washing over me. It's the story she had to tell. To herself, to other people. It justifies everything. "You don't have to find a way to understand it, Melissa. It's not your job to psychoanalyze the person who just set your life on fire. Your only job right now is to keep that door locked." "I know," I said. "It is locked." We talked for a little while longer. Sarah didn't offer solutions. She just listened. She validated. She was the anchor in the storm, the voice of reason that I had been silencing in my own head for a decade. When we hung up, the house was quiet again. Dana was gone. I looked at the wallet. Kevin Miller. He was a stranger, an unwilling participant in the wreckage of my friendship, but he was a person who deserved his wallet back. I was a nurse. I was responsible. I found a padded envelope in my office drawer. I wrote his name and the address from his license on the front in neat block letters. I placed the wallet inside, with all its cards and its cash untouched. Then I picked up the note. My psycho roommate. For a second, I thought about putting it in the envelope. A piece of evidence. Proof. Let this stranger see what kind of person Dana really was. But I stopped. It wasn't my story to tell him. The only person who needed to know the truth was me. And I knew. Finally, I knew. Vindicating myself to a stranger wouldn't fix the decade of self-betrayal. It wouldn't clean the sticky residue from my floors or erase the memory of faces in my hallway. It was just more drama. It was engaging in a fight that was already over. I tore the note into 4 small, neat squares. Then I tore those squares into smaller and smaller pieces until the looping script was just confetti. I dropped the tiny bits of paper into the trash can under the sink, next to the sticky napkins and broken glass. I sealed the envelope. I would mail it tomorrow. I walked through my house, my home. The air was still and clean. The quiet was no longer piercing or heavy. It was just quiet. It was the prize. It was the reward for the hardest thing I had ever done. It was peace. The pounding stopped. For a long moment, the only sound was the ringing in my own ears, an echo of the chaos that had filled my house just hours before. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the absence of Dana's voice, of her fists against my door. I stayed where I was, my back pressed against the wood, as if my body alone could reinforce the boundary I had just drawn. It felt like a wall of steel. It felt fragile as glass. My legs ached. My head throbbed. I was a wire pulled taut, vibrating with the leftover energy of the confrontation. I was drained. A hollowed-out feeling had settled in my chest, right where the frantic energy had been. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was just quiet. My phone sitting on the entryway table buzzed, then buzzed again. I knew without looking. I walked over and picked it up, the screen glowing with her name. Dana. I'm so sorry, Mel. Please just talk to me. A minute passed. Dana, I can't believe you'd do this to me. I'm standing out here in the dark. Another minute. Dana, I thought we were sisters. I made a mistake. Don't throw away 10 years over one stupid party. One stupid party. The words were a masterclass in minimization. It wasn't about the party. It was never just about the party. It was about the key. It was about the assumption. It was about the lie she told her friends, the one I found tucked inside a stranger's wallet. The psycho roommate who is always working. You were just a place, a convenient location for a life I wasn't invited to. I didn't reply. I held my thumb over the power button until the screen went black. It was a small act, but it felt monumental. I had turned off the noise. My gaze drifted over the living room. It was a landscape of violation. Red plastic cups like fallen soldiers littered the floor. A sticky, dark ring of spilled beer marred the surface of my favorite oak coffee table. A crushed bag of chips was ground into the rug my mother had given me. This wasn't my home. Not like this. It was a venue, a public space that had been used and discarded. The smell of stale alcohol and strangers' perfume hung in the air, a ghost of the invasion. For a long time, I just stood there, surveying the wreckage. It was easier. To just look at it was easier than starting to fix it, because starting meant accepting it was real. But a nurse knows about triage. You assess the damage, you identify the most critical wound, and you treat it first. The trash could wait. The sticky floors could wait. The most critical wound was the feeling that this space was no longer mine. My hand went to my pocket, my fingers closing around the cool metal of Kevin Miller's wallet. That was a problem for later. First things first. I walked into the kitchen, pulled the trash can from under the sink, and returned to the living room. I started with a single red cup. I picked it up, its plastic crinkling in my hand, and dropped it into the bag, then another, and another. The work was mechanical, mindless. It was something to do with my hands while my mind raced. With every piece of trash, I felt like I was trying to erase a memory. This is where they danced. This is where they spilled a drink. This is where Dana stood, the queen of a castle she didn't build, and told everyone I was just the psycho roommate. It was too much. The bag sagged in my hand. I felt my resolve beginning to fray, the hollowed-out feeling threatening to fill with tears. I needed to hear a voice, a real voice, one that saw me. I set the trash bag down, pulled out my phone, and turned it back on. There were more messages from Dana, a dozen of them, each one more desperate and manipulative than the last. I ignored them all and dialed my sister. Sarah picked up on the second ring. "Mel, it's late. Is everything okay?" Her voice, so clear and direct, was an anchor. "I did it," I said. my own voice sounding thin and distant. Did what? Your shift end early? No. I mean, yes, but I did it, Sarah. With Dana. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could picture her sitting up straighter, her full attention snapping into focus. What happened? I told her everything. The early return, the sea of strangers, the music so loud the floor vibrated. I told her about Dana's lie that we were roommates. I told her about kicking everyone out, the silent standoff in the living room. I told her the words that still felt foreign and powerful in my own memory. Give me the key. When I finished, the silence on the line was different this time. It wasn't heavy, it was thoughtful. Good, Sarah said finally. Her voice was firm, laced with something that sounded like pride. It's about damn time, Mel. She kept pounding on the door, I whispered, and texting, saying I'm throwing away our friendship. What friendship? Sarah's question was sharp, not cruel, but pointed. A surgeon's scalpel. The one where she uses your car, your clothes, your house? The one where you're her rock? A rock is just something you stand on, Mel. It doesn't get anything back. I sank onto the arm of the sofa, the plastic of a nearby cup crinkling under my weight. I know. I found something else, too. I told her about the wallet, about the note, about being the psycho roommate. Sarah swore, a low, sharp sound. Of course she did. She had to have a story, right? A way to make herself the victim in advance, just in case you ever found out. It's what she does. She pre-writes the narrative, so she's always the hero. She was right. It was so calculated. Dana would ensure you never would have known. It wasn't a thoughtless mistake. It was a deliberate, layered deception. So she's gone, Sarah asked. I didn't let her in. I just let her pound on the door until she gave up. Okay, good. Now, first thing in the morning, you're calling a locksmith, she said, her tone shifting into practical big sister mode. The thought hadn't even occurred to me, but the moment she said it, it was the only thing that mattered. The key. Dana still had other copies. The one I gave her wasn't the only one she'd ever possessed. Over the years, there had been keys for dog sitting, for watering plants. I had no idea how many were unaccounted for. The thought sent a fresh wave of violation through me. My sanctuary had a back door, and my enemy had the key. You're right, I said, a new kind of energy surging through me. Of course, the key. Call one right now, Sarah urged. A 24-hour service. Pay whatever it costs. I'll send you the money. You're not sleeping in that house until the locks are changed. We hung up, and I did exactly as she said. The locksmith arrived in less than an hour, a quiet man with a tired face and a toolbox that looked like it had seen everything. He didn't ask questions when I explained I needed every exterior lock changed immediately. He just nodded and got to work. I sat in the kitchen listening to the sounds. The whir of the drill as he removed the old deadbolt from the front door was a violent cleansing noise. It was the sound of removal, of extraction. He was cutting out the part of my home that was accessible to her. He was closing the wound. When he was finished, he handed me a set of new keys. They were cool and solid in my palm, sharp and unfamiliar. They didn't carry the memory of a 10-year friendship. They were blank. All set, he said. I paid him, adding a large tip that made his tired eyes widen slightly. He deserved it. He had done more than change a few locks. He had restored a wall. After he left, I walked to the front door and tested the new deadbolt. The bolt slid into place with a smooth, solid thunk, a final definitive sound. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, the same door Dana had pounded on, and for the first time since I'd come home, I felt a flicker of peace. My home was mine again. My eyes landed on the wallet, still sitting on the entryway table. I picked it up. Kevin Miller. I opened it and looked at the note one last time. Dana says her psycho roommate is always working, so we're good for tonight. Before, the words had felt like a betrayal. Now they felt like a justification, a confirmation. I took the note out, folded it, and placed it on the table. Then I found a padded envelope in my office, slipped the wallet inside, and addressed it to the address on Kevin Miller's driver's license. I would mail it tomorrow. No note of my own, no explanation. This small drama was not my mess to engage with. I was simply returning lost property. The house was still a wreck. The air was still stale, but the quiet was different now. It wasn't the heavy, anxious quiet from before. It was a real quiet, a quiet that belonged to me. It's a strange feeling to realize you are a supporting character in the story of your own life, a piece of the set, a convenient plot device. I walked back into the living room, picked up the trash bag, and collected another empty cup. The work didn't feel so overwhelming anymore. It was just cleaning, my cleaning, in my house, a house that was finally and completely a sanctuary again. The pounding stopped, and in its place, a silence so complete it felt louder than the noise it replaced. It was a hollowed-out quiet, the kind that rushes in after a blast. I stood in the middle of my living room, my back to the door, and just listened to the nothing. My heart was still a frantic drum against my ribs, an echo of the chaos. The adrenaline hadn't faded yet. It was a low, electric hum beneath my skin. I waited for the sound of her car starting, for the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway as she finally, truly left. But there was nothing, just the whisper of the house settling around me. It was over. The confrontation, the shouting, the shame that had descended on the party like a thick fog. It was all done. But the wreckage remained. I took a breath, and the air was stale. It smelled of spilled beer, sweat, and a cheap, fruity perfume I knew wasn't mine. It was the smell of violation. My home, my sanctuary, had been turned into a public space, a cheap venue. The thought landed with a cold, heavy thud in my stomach. You were just a place, a convenient location. Slowly, I began to move. It wasn't a conscious decision, more like an instinct, the instinct of a nurse seeing a wound that needed to be cleaned. I started in the living room. My feet stuck to the hardwood floor with every step. I looked down and saw a syrupy, dark puddle near the armchair. Someone spilled soda. I found a half-eaten slice of pizza, cheese congealed, resting on a stack of my nursing journals. A dark ring of condensation had already soaked into the top cover. It wasn't just a mess. It was evidence. Every piece of trash, every sticky spot, every overturned cushion was a testament to Dana's complete and utter disregard for me, for my life, for this space I had worked so hard to build. I picked up an empty beer bottle from the windowsill, my fingers closing around the cool, damp glass. She knew how much this house meant to me. She knew it was the only place I could truly be off, the only place the exhaustion of a 16-hour shift could finally drain away. She knew, and she did it anyway. That was the part that kept snagging in my mind, like a thread caught on a nail. This wasn't a thoughtless act, it was a calculated one. She had planned it. She had told people she lived here. The psycho roommate. The words from the note I'd found in that wallet echoed in my head. She hadn't just used my house. She had used my very existence as a prop in a story she was telling about herself. A story where she was the long-suffering protagonist, and I was a crazy, unreasonable obstacle. It was easier than admitting she was 38 and had nothing to show for it. easier than admitting she couldn't afford a place like this on her own. It was always about what was easier for Dana. And for 10 years, I had made myself easy for her. I had smoothed her path, absorbed her chaos, and asked for nothing in return. I was her rock, but a rock is just something you stand on until you're ready to leap to the next thing. I went into the kitchen and grabbed a roll of paper towels and a bottle of cleaner. I knelt and started scrubbing the sticky spot on the floor. The motion was mechanical, repetitive. Scrub, wipe, repeat. With each swipe, I felt a tiny bit of control returning. I wasn't just cleaning a floor, I was erasing them. I was taking my space back, inch by painstaking inch. My phone, sitting on the counter, buzzed, then buzzed again and again, a rapid-fire succession of notifications. I didn't have to look. I knew it was her, the frantic cascade of texts that would follow any time she was denied something she wanted. They would start with feigned confusion, then move to indignation, then to wounded accusations. How could you do this to me, after everything I've done for you? I finished with the floor and stood up, my knees aching. I walked over to the phone. The screen was lit up with her name, 7 new messages, 2 missed calls. I stared at it, at her face smiling in the little circle of her contact photo. It was a picture I had taken of her last summer, on a hike she had complained about for the first 2 miles and then bragged about for the next 2 months. My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me, a deeply ingrained, decade-old part, wanted to open it, to read the words, to let her manipulation seep in, just to see what form it would take this time. It was a morbid curiosity. Then I thought about the cigarette burn on my bookshelf, the pizza on my journals, the lie about the psycho roommate. I pressed my thumb down on her name, but I didn't open the message thread. I scrolled to the bottom of the contact page, to the option I had never once considered using. Block this caller. A confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to block this contact? It felt like a wall of steel rising up inside me, solid, unbreachable. I pressed block. Her picture vanished from the notification bar. The messages disappeared into a digital void. I did the same on every social media app we shared. It took less than a minute to digitally erase a 10-year friendship. It was brutally simple. The finality of it left me feeling strangely light, drained, but light. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning. I bagged up all the trash red plastic cups, crumpled napkins, empty chip bags. So much trash. I found a single earring under the sofa, a cheap, gaudy thing that I threw away without a second thought. I stripped the guest room bed where I was sure people had been and threw the sheets and comforter into a heap by the laundry room. It was in the guest room closet that I found the final piece. I had opened it to see if anything had been tossed inside, and there, on the floor, was a duffel bag, Dana's duffel bag, and hanging on the rod were 3 outfits, her clothes, not just a spare shirt, but outfits, a dress for going out, a pair of jeans and a sweater, a work uniform from a catering gig she'd had for a few weeks last month. It was a stage. The whole house had been her stage, and this was her costume department. She wasn't just telling people she lived here. She was creating the evidence to back it up. If a new friend came over, she could grab a sweater from the closet. She could make it look real. She could ensure you never would have known. A cold wave of nausea rolled through me. How long had this been her plan? How many other parties had there been on nights I worked late, smaller ones that she cleaned up perfectly, leaving no trace? Parties where she was the generous host in her beautiful home, complaining about the roommate who was, conveniently, never there. The thought made the air feel thin. It was a betrayal so deep and so methodical that I couldn't even see the bottom of it. I zipped up the duffel bag, stuffed her hanging clothes inside it, and dragged it to the front door. I left it on the porch. She could come and get it whenever she wanted. I wouldn't be watching. I wouldn't even know. By the time I was done, it was almost 3 a.m. The house was clean, or clean enough. The air smelled of bleach and lemon cleaner instead of stale beer. All the surfaces gleamed under the soft light of the lamp. The trash was gone. The floors were no longer sticky. I sank into my armchair, the one that was finally mine again, and pulled my feet up onto the cushion. The exhaustion was bone deep, a heavy leaden weight in my limbs, but my mind was quiet. The frantic drumming had ceased. The house was quiet again. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, listening. There was the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, the sound of my own breathing, slow and even. It wasn't a hollowed-out quiet anymore. It was a peaceful one. It was the sound of my own life, waiting for me to finally listen. Blocking her number didn't fix the silence. It only made it absolute. For a long time, I just stood in my hallway. The locksmith was gone. The new keys felt heavy and sharp in my pocket, a small metallic promise of security. But security felt like a concept from another life. The air was thick with the ghosts of strangers' laughter and the sour smell of spilled beer that clung to the air despite the open windows. My house was mine again, but it wasn't. It was a crime scene, a place that had been violated, and the evidence was everywhere. My eyes kept landing on the black duffel bag Dana had left by the door in her haste. It sat there, slumped and full, a silent accusation. Part of me wanted to drag it to the curb and let the trash collectors haul it away, to erase the last physical piece of her from my home. It was easier that way. Avoidance was always easier. But the woman who avoided conflict, who let things slide for a decade just to keep a fragile peace, was the woman who ended up here, standing in the wreckage of her own sanctuary. That woman was gone. Or at least I was trying to make her gone. The note was still on the counter. The words, "My psycho roommate," burned into my mind. That note deserved an answer. The bag was the only place left to find one. I walked over to it, my feet sticking slightly to the floor. I nudged it with my toe. It was heavy, substantial. This wasn't an overnight bag. This was the bag of someone who was prepared to stay. My breath hitched. With a sense of grim purpose, I dragged it into the center of the living room, right onto the rug that was still damp in one corner. I knelt. The zipper was cold under my fingers. Unzipping it felt like a final, irreversible act. It felt like opening a tomb. The first thing I saw was clothes. Not just a change of clothes, but outfits, folded neatly. There was a pair of scrubs, not hospital issue, but the trendy, expensive kind Dana liked, and a pair of pristine white sneakers, her work costume. Underneath that, a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, still with the tags on, a going-out outfit. Then a pair of worn-in jeans and a soft, oversized sweater, her relaxing-at-home outfit. My home. She had curated a wardrobe for her life in my house, a life I was never meant to see. The thought was so cold, so clinical, it didn't even feel like a betrayal. It felt like a biology lesson. I was observing the behavior of a creature I had fundamentally misunderstood. I kept digging. There was a DOP kit filled with toiletries, not travel sizes. Full-sized bottles of the expensive shampoo she used, a brand new toothbrush in its plastic case, her specific face wash. It was a complete, parallel set to the one she kept at her own apartment. She hadn't been borrowing my things. She had been stocking my shelves. It was more efficient, more convenient. You never would have known. My fingers, numb and clumsy, brushed against a side pocket. Inside, I found a small stack of papers held together with a binder clip. My stomach hollowed out. This was it. This was the part I was afraid of. It was mail. The top letter was a credit card bill. It was addressed to Dana, at my address. The next was a bank statement. Same thing. A catalog from a high-end furniture store, a flyer for a new yoga studio in the neighborhood. All addressed to Dana. All delivered here, to my home, my sanctuary. I dropped the letters as if they had burned me. The silence in the room was deafening now, a roaring pressure in my ears. This wasn't a one-time party. This wasn't a recent development. This was a system, a long-running, carefully constructed lie. She wasn't just telling people she lived here. She was proving it, building a paper trail, cementing an identity that was built on the foundation of my life, my mortgage, my hard work. I was her rock, but a rock is just something you stand on. It doesn't get a say in the matter. I forced myself to pick the papers back up. Tucked in the back of the stack was a small pile of receipts. A receipt from the grocery store down the street for coffee beans, a specific expensive brand I didn't drink, and almond milk. A receipt from a home goods store for a set of 4 slate coasters. I remembered seeing them on my coffee table during the party, thinking a guest had brought them. They were still there, sitting in a neat stack. She had bought things for my house. She was decorating. She was nesting. It's a strange feeling, to realize you weren't a person to someone. You were just a place, a conveniently located, well-appointed, empty place. I sat back on my heels, the contents of the bag spread out before me like an archaeological dig into a life I was never meant to discover. The clothes, the mail, the receipts. It was the complete kit for a double life. She had her real apartment, the one she complained about, with the loud neighbors and the bad plumbing. And then she had this one, her weekend home, her party house, her secret. My name is Melissa. But to the world Dana was curating, I was just the psycho roommate, the inconvenient, unpredictable owner who might come home and ruin the fun. The lie was so complete, so thorough that my own presence in my own home had become the problem. My hands were shaking. I couldn't process it alone anymore. I needed an anchor. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy, that the scale of this was as monstrous as it felt. I pulled out my phone and dialed my sister. Sarah picked up on the second ring. "Mel, you okay? I've been worried." My voice came out as a whisper. "She was living here, Sarah." "What do you mean living there? I thought you changed the locks." "No," I said, my voice cracking. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to force the words out. I mean, she was living here. When I wasn't here, I found her bag. I explained everything. The different outfits for her different lives, the full-size toiletries, the receipts for coasters and coffee. When I got to the mail, my voice broke completely. "Bank statements, Sarah, a credit card bill, sent here, to my address." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. It was a heavy, loaded silence. I could picture Sarah's face, her expression shifting from concern to a kind of cold, hard anger. She was always the one who saw things clearly, the one who wasn't afraid of the sharp edges of the truth. "Mel," she finally said, her voice dangerously quiet. She wasn't just throwing a party, she was committing mail fraud. The phrase hit me like a splash of ice water. Fraud. It was such a legal, sterile word for something that felt so deeply personal, a violation. "She was building a proof of residency," Sarah continued, her mind working faster than mine. "With that mail, she could get a driver's license with your address. She could list it on job applications. She could tell anyone and everyone she lived there, and she'd have the paperwork to back it up. The room began to spin. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. The calculation, the long-term planning. This wasn't impulsive. This was a strategy. Why? I whispered. Why would she do all this? Because her life wasn't good enough, Sarah said, the words sharp and certain. And yours was. It was easier to steal yours than to fix her own. She wasn't your friend, Mel. She was your tenant, and you were paying all the bills. A single tearless sob escaped my lips. It was a dry, hollowed-out sound. Sarah was right. That was the simplest, most brutal truth of it all. I wasn't a friend to be cherished. I was a resource to be exploited. My home wasn't a sanctuary to be respected. It was an asset to be leveraged. My absence wasn't a loss. It was an opportunity. The friendship I had spent a decade trying to preserve hadn't just died. It had never existed at all. It was a ghost, a story I told myself because the truth was too lonely. I looked at the evidence spread across my floor, the life of Dana, the one who lived in the nice house with the nice things. And then there was me, the psycho roommate, the footnote in her story. It was all a lie, and I had the receipts to prove it. Mail fraud. The two words hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. They landed differently than party or betrayal. Those were emotional concepts, things I could feel in the hollowed-out space in my chest. This was something else. It was cold. It was legal. It had edges and definitions. My gaze dropped from Sarah's face back to the pile of envelopes on my floor. A bank statement from a bank I didn't use, a credit card bill with a pastel logo, a generic windowed envelope that looked like it held a check. All of them addressed to Dana. All of them sent to my home, my sanctuary. She was building a life here, I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. My own voice sounded distant, like it was coming from across a room. She was building a file, Sarah corrected, her tone devoid of its usual warmth. It was the tone she used at work when a situation was critical, clinical. Proof of residency. That's what this is. You need it for everything. A driver's license, a car loan, a job application. I sank down to my knees, the worn wood of the floor cool against my skin. My fingers, trembling just slightly, reached for the nearest envelope. It was from a major credit card company. I slid a finger under the flap. It was already unsealed. Convenient. Of course it was. Dana was an expert in convenience. Inside, the statement detailed a month of her life, lunches I wasn't invited to, new clothes from stores she'd once told me were too expensive, a charge for a bar downtown on a night she had claimed to be home with the flu. It was a map of a person I didn't know, funded by a life I was unknowingly supporting. She wasn't just staying here. She was living here, on paper. She was a ghost with a credit score. It was a stage. That's what I realized, sitting there on the floor of my living room, surrounded by the wreckage of her secret life. My house wasn't a home to her. It was a stage set, a very convincing, well-appointed set for the play she was performing for the rest of the world. And I was just part of the scenery, the quiet, reliable, always-at-work backdrop that made her performance possible. I was the infrastructure. All those times, I whispered, looking up at Sarah, who was now leaning against the doorframe, her arms crossed. Her expression was grim, patient. She was waiting for me to catch up to a truth she had apparently known for years. All those times she'd joke about it. Joke about what? About her mail. She'd laugh and say, "My landlord loses half my stuff. I should just have it sent here." And I'd laugh with her. My own laugh caught in my throat, a brittle, ugly sound. Once, a package of hers actually did get delivered here by mistake. She made such a big deal out of it, thanking me, saying how I was her rock. "You're so much more reliable than my building," she'd said. It was a test. I saw that now. She was testing the boundary, planting the seed, seeing how I'd react. And I had reacted exactly as she'd expected. I'd made it easy. It was always easier. "Melissa." Sarah's voice was gentle now, pulling me from the spiral. "What do you want to do?" I looked at the letters. Evidence. That's what they were. Proof of a crime. For a moment, a flash of something hot and sharp went through me. An image of a courtroom, of Dana, her charming smile finally gone, forced to answer for what she did. The thought of exposing her, of showing everyone the rotten truth beneath the bright, shiny surface was tempting. It felt like justice. But then the image faded, replaced by another. Months of lawyers, phone calls, statements. More of my life, more of my time, more of my energy, all of it revolving around her. Her name constantly in my mouth, her presence a ghost in my house, not just for a night, but for as long as the process took. She would still be taking from me. She would still be the main character, and I would still be a supporting role in her drama. The violation wasn't just the party. It wasn't just the mail. The violation was the theft of my peace. And I realized I didn't want justice. I wanted it to be over. "I want her gone," I said. The words were quiet, but they felt like they were forged from steel. Completely. I don't want to see her. I don't want to hear from her. I don't want any part of my life to have her in it, ever again. Sarah nodded slowly. "Okay, we can do that. But what about this?" She gestured to the duffel bag and the scattered mail. I looked at the bag. The curated outfits for a life I wasn't meant to see. The toiletries that marked my bathroom as her own. The stack of letters that proved my friendship was a transaction. It was a kit for a con artist. Slowly, I stood up. My legs felt steadier now. The shock was receding, leaving behind a strange, cold calm. I walked into the kitchen, my sister's eyes following me. I pulled the roll of heavy-duty trash bags from under the sink. I came back and opened one. The plastic crackled in the quiet room. One by one, I picked up the letters. I didn't look at them again. I didn't need to. I had seen enough. I stacked them into a neat pile, a monument to a decade of lies. I placed the whole stack at the bottom of the duffel bag. Then I gathered her clothes, the cheap tops, the jeans, the dress she'd borrowed months ago and sworn she'd lost. I stuffed them all in on top of the mail. Her makeup bag, her spare toothbrush, everything. When it was all inside, I zipped the duffel bag shut. The sound was definitive, final. "What are you doing with it?" Sarah asked. "I'm not keeping it," I said, "and I'm not throwing it away." Throwing it away felt too violent, too emotional. It felt like a reaction. I was done reacting to Dana. From now on, I would only act. And I'm not giving it back to her. I'm never opening my door to her again. I walked past Sarah and into the spare room, the one that used to be my office before it slowly became Dana's unofficial storage unit. In the back of the closet was an empty cardboard box from a long ago move. I dragged it out. It was dusty. Perfect. I put the duffel bag inside the box. I folded the cardboard flaps down and went back to the kitchen for the packing tape. I taped the box shut, first one way, then the other. I kept wrapping the tape around and around, the screeching sound echoing in the house. It was a frantic, desperate noise, but the motion was calming. I was sealing it away. I was containing the contamination. When I was done, I pushed the box into the deepest corner of the spare room closet, behind old winter coats and a box of books I hadn't touched in years, out of sight. Sarah had watched the whole ritual without a word. When I finally turned back to her, my hands dusty and my heart rate finally slowing, she gave me a small, sad smile. "You're not going to report her, are you?" I shook my head. Reporting her keeps her attached to me. It makes this whole thing bigger. I just want it to be smaller. I want it to be nothing. It's a strange feeling to have a 10-year friendship erased, not to have it end in a fiery fight or a slow, sad drifting apart, but to have it revealed as something that never existed at all. It didn't feel like losing a friend. It felt like waking up from a dream. The details are vivid for a moment, but you know none of it was real. You were just a place. We stood there for a minute in the quiet. The house was mine again. The silence was mine. It wasn't the tense, waiting silence of before. It was a peaceful silence, an empty silence. "I'm so tired," I said, and the exhaustion hit me like a physical wave, all 16 hours of my shift and the hours since crashing down at once. I felt drained, scoured, but clean. "I know," Sarah said. She came over and finally put a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was an anchor. "Go to bed, Melissa. I'll let myself out." I nodded, not having the energy for anything more. I walked to my bedroom, and for the first time since coming home, I closed the door. I didn't bother changing. I just fell onto my bed, the scent of fresh sheets, my sheets rising up around me. My last thought before sleep took me was not of Dana. It was not of the party, or the lies, or the box in the closet. It was the simple, profound realization that for the first time in a very long time, I did not have to worry about anyone but myself. The absence was a relief. The sun came up anyway. It felt like an insult. The light, clean and unforgiving, poured through my living room window, illuminating every detail of the wreckage. It caught the fine, silvery glitter dusted over my coffee table like a layer of frost. It glinted off the rims of a dozen abandoned plastic cups. It revealed a dark, sticky ring on the hardwood floor, where a bottle had been spilled and left to seep into the wood. I was sitting on the stairs, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, even though the house wasn't cold. I had been there for hours, a silent sentinel in the ruin of my own home. After I'd packed Dana's bag away, the adrenaline had vanished, leaving behind a profound, hollowed-out exhaustion. I didn't have the energy to sleep. I didn't have the energy to clean. So I just sat, and I watched the night turn to morning. The silence was absolute. It was a heavy, weighted silence, a stark contrast to the phantom thumping of bass that still echoed in my memory. My house, my sanctuary, had never felt less like my own. It felt like a public space after closing time, filled with the ghosts of strangers and the stale, sour smell of their good time. A violation. That was the word that kept turning over in my mind. It wasn't just the mess. It was the complete disregard, the assumption that my space, my life, was merely a convenient backdrop for hers. You were just a place. I finally stood, my joints aching. The blanket fell away. There was no point in delaying it. This was a mess I had to clean, not just because it was disgusting, but because I couldn't begin to feel clean myself until it was gone. I started with the trash. I found a box of black garbage bags under the sink, a purchase I'd made weeks ago, and it felt like a lifetime. I walked through the rooms, my movements slow and methodical. Every crushed cup, every soggy napkin, every abandoned bottle was a small piece of a story I was choosing to end. I didn't let myself get angry. The anger was a fire that had burned itself out, leaving only ash. What I felt instead was a deep, quiet sadness, a grief for a friendship I was realizing had never truly existed. I was her rock, but a rock is just something you stand on until you find higher ground. I was in the kitchen, wiping down a counter that was sticky with some kind of bright red punch, when I heard it, a sharp, confident rap on the front door. I froze, the damp cloth in my hand. My heart didn't leap. It just stopped, a dead weight in my chest. I knew who it was. The timing, the entitled sound of the knock it was all Dana. I stood perfectly still, listening. The new deadbolt, the one the locksmith had installed just hours ago, suddenly felt like the most important object I owned. It felt like a wall of steel. Another knock, harder this time. Mel? Melissa? I know you're in there. My phone's going straight to voicemail. Her voice was normal, casual even, a little bit annoyed, like she was the one being inconvenienced. It was the voice she used when she'd shown up an hour late for something, expecting you to just be grateful she'd arrived at all. It was a masterclass in manipulation, designed to make you question your own reaction. Am I overreacting? Maybe it wasn't that bad. I did not answer. I did not move. I just stood in my wrecked kitchen, listening to the sound of my own quiet breathing. Mel, come on, open up, she called, her voice changing now, taking on a wheedling tone, the one that used to work so well on me. I just need to grab my bag. I left some stuff. We need to talk about this. We. As if this was a mutual problem we had to solve together, as if she hadn't been the one to detonate a bomb in the middle of my life. I walked silently from the kitchen, across the sticky floor of the living room, and stood a few feet from the front door. I put my hand on the wall to steady myself. Go away, Dana, I said. My voice was low, but it carried. It sounded foreign in the quiet house. It sounded final. There was a pause. I could almost hear her processing this new reality, the reality where her key didn't work and her voice held no power. What? Don't be like this, she said, and now the frustration was clear. I said I was sorry. Let me just get my things and we can figure this out. I'll help you clean. The offer was so absurd, so perfectly Dana, that a humorless laugh almost escaped me. She would help me clean up the mess she made, and in doing so, she would rewrite the narrative, and it would become a funny story, an anecdote about that crazy party. She would smooth it all over, and I would be expected to accept the apology because it was easier. It was always easier. There's nothing to figure out, I said, my voice stronger this time. Go away. Melissa, this is ridiculous. You're being hysterical. My name is Melissa. For a decade, she had called me Mel. The use of my full name was a tactic, a way to frame me as the formal, unreasonable one, the psycho roommate. I didn't say anything else. I just stood there, my hand flat against the wall, and I waited. I heard her sigh, a theatrical put-upon sound. I heard the scrape of her shoes on the concrete porch. Then silence. I stayed by the door for a full 5 minutes, waiting to see if she would try again. She didn't. When I finally looked through the peephole, the porch was empty. The relief that washed over me was so immense it made my knees weak. I slid down the wall and sat on the floor, my head in my hands. I had held the line. For the first time, I had held the line. It was then that I remembered the wallet. Kevin Miller, the duffel bag and its damning contents were tucked away in the back of my closet. But the wallet was on my bedside table. I had separated it, knowing it was different. It wasn't evidence of Dana's betrayal of me. It was the property of an innocent bystander. My nursing instincts, the part of me that is programmed to help, kicked in. The man had lost his wallet. I had to return it. I retrieved it and opened it again. Kevin Miller. The driver's license photo showed a man in his late 20s with a kind, slightly goofy smile. Tucked behind it was a business card. He was a graphic designer. I found his number on the company website and dialed before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the second ring. Kevin Miller. Hi, my name is Melissa, I started, my voice still rough. This is a bit strange, but I think I have your wallet. Did you lose it last night? There was a beat of surprised silence, then a flood of relief. Oh my God, yes, you found it. That's amazing. I thought it was gone for good. Where did you find it? It was at my house, I said, the words feeling inadequate. There was a party here. Right, Dana's party, he said, his voice cheerful. Man, that's incredible. Thank you so much. I owe you big time. Dana, your roommate, said she'd look for it, but I figured it was a long shot. There it was. Your roommate. The lie, spoken so casually by a stranger, landed like a punch. It made it real in a way that even the note hadn't. This was the story she was telling the world. I wasn't her responsible, stable friend who owned a home. I was her roommate, her psycho roommate. It made the party less of a violation and more of a squabble between cohabitants. It was brilliant in its own toxic way. It's no problem, I said, my voice flat. I was drained. I can mail it to you, or you can pick it up. I can swing by, absolutely. I'm not far. Would now be okay? I looked around at the disaster zone that was my living room. The last thing I wanted was for a stranger to see this, to see the evidence of my humiliation. But then I realized I didn't care what he thought. His opinion of me didn't matter. That's fine, I said, and gave him the address. 20 minutes later, another knock came. This one was softer, more hesitant. I looked through the peephole and saw the man from the driver's license photo. I opened the door just wide enough to step out onto the porch, pulling it closed behind me. I didn't want him looking inside. Melissa? He asked, that same goofy smile on his face. He was holding a $50 bill. That's me, I said, holding out his wallet. Here you go. I think everything's still in there. Thank you, seriously, he said, taking it and handing me the cash. Please take this, for the trouble. You don't have to do that, I said, trying to refuse. I insist. You're a lifesaver, he said, stuffing the bill into the pocket of the sweatshirt I was wearing. He glanced at my closed door. Crazy night, huh? Hope Dana didn't get in too much trouble with you for it. It was a strange feeling, being seen as the obstacle, the fun police, the psycho roommate who was probably giving poor, fun-loving Dana a hard time. For a second, I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to show him the trashed house, the mail, the note. I wanted to vindicate myself, but I didn't, because I realized it didn't matter. Vindicating myself to him wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't unspill the drinks or untell the lies. The only person I needed to prove anything to was myself. So I just gave him a small, tired smile. She's not my roommate, I said simply. His brow furrowed for a second in confusion, but he quickly shrugged it off. It wasn't his problem. Well, thanks again, he said, backing away. Really? I watched him walk to his car and drive away. Then I stepped back inside my house and locked the door. I leaned against it, the $50 bill crumpled in my hand. He hadn't seen the mess. He hadn't seen the proof. He had only seen me, and a story I refused to be a part of. I looked at the living room again. The sun was higher now, the light stronger. The glitter seemed to mock me. But something had shifted. The feeling of violation was still there, a dull ache beneath my ribs, but it was joined by something else, a flicker of ownership, of purpose. I walked to the kitchen, unfolded a new black garbage bag, and went back to work. The ghosts were fading. The noise was gone. It was my house again, and I was the only one left to clean it up.